March 14, 2012, my son Thomas lost his battle with the disease of addiction. I now belong to a club that no parent should ever belong to. Do you know the signs? Do you know the trends that children are doing in today's world? Do you know the signs and symptoms? Do you know the signs and symptoms of drug abuse? I want to empower and educate Long Islanders by bringing a force of professionals and how to prevent the disease of addiction. Long Island in Crisis. Good evening and welcome to Long Island in Crisis. This show is about the substance use pandemic that's going on in this country, and a lot of press and acknowledgement because we have an opiate and heroin epidemic at this point in time. But what I always want to put forward is that it's substance use disorder that is the disease. The drug is unimportant. Alcoholism is still the #1 killer in this country, especially from Memorial Day to Labor Day. We lose way too many families to drunken driving. So, it's very important not to say, oh, well, I'm okay. My son or daughter is only drinking and smoking pot. We can never be calm in saying those words anymore. It is not the 1950s. We know a lot better. There's a lot more science that goes along with this. And tonight, though, we are going to be discussing our veterans. Our veterans are coming home from serving this great country of ours, and they're coming home not to services that they are certainly entitled to. And what we're going to talk about, too, is families. So who's taking care of the families when their loved one is serving this great country of ours? We know better. We have to do better. And my guest, again, is my good friend, Darrell St. George, who, you are a teacher in Northport, but you served this country as a Marine and as a corpsman. And I can only imagine, I don't even want to imagine what you saw in combat. And by the grace of God, you came home and you have risen above what you did see. And I'm sure, did you seek help for whatever was troubling you when you came home? Because there had to be an adjustment, Darrell.
Yeah, I mean, we've talked a lot about my coming home and having to deal with the death of my brother.
Yes.
Most of our conversations have focused on that.
So for people that don't know,
right.
You lost your brother to substance use disorder,
right.
Specifically an overdose, and
yeah,
so you're all too familiar in that realm too.
Right. Yeah. It was like a perfect storm for me, because I had gotten back from Afghanistan, and when I had gotten back, I could tell very quickly that my brother was having a hard time, and it was not long after my return that he had passed away. So really, for me, processing my experiences in Afghanistan, it was almost as if it was shelved, because then I had to process the grief that came with losing my brother. And so there was just so much that I was really struggling with. And I think on some level I'm still processing it, but...
How many years ago was it?
So my brother passed away in 2012, and I had gotten back from Afghanistan in 2011.
Yeah. Wow.
So, yeah, all within about a year was the window of time, was a year. So, when I was in Afghanistan, I was a corpsman, as you said, which is a medic. I was in the Navy, but the Marine Corps is the Department of the Navy. And because they're a Department of the Navy, they're doctors, they're nurses, they're physician assistants, they're medics, which they call corpsmen. They're all sailors. So I was attached to a Marine Corps unit, and I deployed to Afghanistan with the Marines. And while we were in Afghanistan, we had 3 missions. Our mission 1 was to win the hearts and minds of the people, to show the people of Afghanistan that we were there to help them and rebuild their
Okay.
country, to eliminate the Taliban, to get rid of the Taliban, to get rid of Al-Qaeda. And our third mission was poppy eradication, because Afghanistan, as you know, produces over 90% of the world's heroin. Most of the heroin in this country comes from Mexico, but still, most of the world's heroin's coming from Afghanistan, and that is a major source of income for the Taliban.
Yes.
So there's this twisted irony that while I was fulfilling that mission,
Your
I was
brother.
losing students to heroin overdoses,
You know,
and my brother started using.
It's interesting in Afghanistan and in the Middle East that they had said that there will be many American mothers crying over the loss of their children. Didn't necessarily come from the war, did it?
No, they didn't specify, right?
Right. They never specified, but they certainly have done a good job
Yeah,
killing a generation of our children.
they have. And I think that you're right to point that out. It wasn't lost on me.
Right.
It's something I struggle with. I mean, I struggle with guilt in general for many reasons over the loss of my brother, but there is it's almost, for lack of a better expression, it's almost Shakespearean that
Yes.
I was doing that over there,
Yes. It's
and then my brother's using
it's
it.
ironically poetic.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep. That's the way I see it.
No, I feel the same way.
So, when I got back and when he had died, that changed everything for me. And it actually had led to an early discharge for me. So I ended up serving 3 years of my enlistment, which were initially supposed to be for 5 years. But his death had created such stress and created so much trauma in my family that the Navy felt it was best for me to go home and be with my mother and my grandparents and my other relatives who were really having a hard time with it. And I really was having a hard time with it too. I was struggling with my experiences in Afghanistan along with my experiences of losing my brother. And it really took me down a very dark path for a while. So it was really for the best that I go home and be with my family. And when I came home, it was right around the time of Hurricane Sandy, I immediately was tossed back into the classroom.
Yeah.
Which is maybe for the best, because it's better that I didn't have time to just kind of sit and dwell on things. But it was intense, because I was literally, it wasn't like I was starting in the beginning of a school year in September. I was starting late October, early November. So the kids had started with a different teacher,
Yes.
and now there's that difficult transition. And I was lost for a while. It's incredible. In my 3-year absence, all the changes, and we've talked a little bit
Yeah.
about this too. When I left for the Navy, there was no talk of Common Core. There were, the classrooms didn't have smart boards. It was chalkboards. And I come back, and in 3 years, every classroom has a smart board. Everybody's talking about Common Core. They're talking about APPPR. All of this stuff, I don't know what the heck is going on. And I also realize I'm not alone. I start talking to my colleagues. I start talking to other people. So many have been affected by the disease of addiction.
Yes.
So now this is the world I come back to. And I'm trying to process that all and figure out what am I going to do. And one of my colleagues who you've had on the show with me, Tammy Walsh, whose son has struggled and was
Yes.
good friends with my brother, she approached me and she asked me if I would be willing to take on SAD. Which,
Students Against Destructive Decisions.
yep, and I did that with her. She and I did that, and we built the club up. I mean, we really took it and turned it into this huge thing. We've talked a lot about that on your show. The other thing that we're talking about tonight, the other thing that I was trying to process was my experiences in the military and what was happening to a lot of my friends while they were starting to get out. And what I was realizing was they were not being adequately prepared
Yes.
for separation. I learned, yeah.
Yes. So, I mean, as I said, you were in a combat zone.
Yeah.
What you saw and what you experienced is certainly not everyday life on Long Island, New York,
Right.
in the Midwest, in any place here. We don't have those kind of experiences in this country as what goes on in by the grace of God, we don't.
Right.
Although we could probably beg to argue that point with recent events
Yeah.
in the news now. But
Yes.
you're experiencing that, and you can't just come home and be the person that you were when you got sent over there.
Right.
So again, we always come back to coping skills. How do I dull the pain that I feel from seeing what I saw in active combat? And that's what's happening with so many of our vets. Substance use disorder,
Yep.
depression, suicide.
Yep.
What's the number for suicide in this country for veterans?
So 22, but what I would say is, you know, when we look at that
One a
number,
day? Is it
so
higher
I don't
than
know.
that?
What I've heard is it's 22 a day, but what I would
Okay.
suggest is that number. There's a really good book that I want to recommend. It's called Tribe by Sebastian Junger, and he's deployed many times. He's an incredible journalist. He did this documentary called Restrepo, which is also on
Yes.
Netflix. And the most recent book he wrote was called Tribe, and it's all about veteran transitioning. And he talks about that statistic, and I've read this in other publications. The statistic is a little misleading because, first of all, when we talk about 22 veterans a day, while the number is probably close to accurate, you have to look behind those numbers. A lot of those veterans are older veterans.
Okay.
They're like Vietnam era veterans. That's
Okay.
not to say that my generation of veterans aren't part of that. And the other thing, and I spoke to somebody at the VA about this today, I'm sure we'll talk a little bit more about this later on in the interview, but I was at the VA this morning and one of the counselors and I were talking. One of the things that we had discussed was there are a large number of people that go into the military that are already kind of having some issues to begin with.
Correct.
And
they may be young people and
Yeah.
and figuring, all right, you know what, this will straighten me out.
Right. Look, I'll be very frank. Since I'm going to say that, I will say that while I was older when I went in, I think there were definitely some unresolved mental things that were part of my decision making, and I felt that the military would help me. And frankly speaking, before I left, I worked very hard to try to get my brother to enlist because I believed that by getting my brother to enlist, it would help him with the things that he was struggling with. I really believed that.
Yes.
But I've got to be honest with you, Linda. When I went into the Navy, I was very happy that I failed at convincing my brother to enlist because, you know, part of the military culture is this hard charge drinking. You know, you drink
Yes.
hard, you play hard, but you work hard and all of that. And I think that that culture probably would have
Accentuated his problem.
Yeah.
But, you know, so there goes back to we can always work in education about the disease of addiction because people think it's a choice.
Right.
So we're going to get you some discipline. You're going to be told what to do, when to do it, and that choice will be gone from you and you'll be okay.
Right.
Substance use disorder is really the Band-Aid that you're putting on whatever it is that is bothering you,
Right.
whether it be some kind of mental illness
Right.
or some kind of unresolved problems that's
Right.
going on inside of you.
Yeah.
You know, and we all don't want to feel
Right.
pain.
Right.
So it's a very easy
Yeah.
outlet to escape.
Mm-hmm. And you have a lot of veterans who were struggling with those things in high school before they left for the military.
Yes.
They go into the military, it makes it worse. They deploy, they come home, and when they come home, people see they're drinking, they're making bad choices, they're abusing drugs, substance abuse, and and almost immediately they get labeled as having PTSD. And that's where that number is misleading, not just in terms of how it's affecting other generations of veterans, but it is also misleading because some of those people who may be committing suicide, they were already struggling with something before they even entered into the military. And then maybe some of their experiences in the military, whether that be the hard-charging drinking culture or the deployments that they may have gone, will then exacerbate that pre-existing problem. And that's where it gets a little misleading. And I feel, and this book Tribe talks about this, but I felt this even beforehand, I certainly experienced it personally, that PTSD is one of those things that is, and I think you and I were discussing this earlier, you made the parallel to like ADHD.
Yes.
It's overdiagnosed.
Yes.
I mean, let's be very honest, let's be very frank, let's have a frank conversation. When you look at the rates of people who are being diagnosed with PTSD and you compare it to the rates of people who see combat,
Yes.
there's a huge discrepancy. Less than 1% of people in this country serve in the military, and of that, less than 1%, an even smaller percentage see combat. So you're talking about a very, very small number of people. And then when you talk about that number of people that's getting diagnosed with PTSD, what's going on here? Right? Now, you could say that, post-traumatic stress disorder. If you and I witness a traumatic event,
Yes.
if you talk about what your son witnessed,
Yes.
that is a truly traumatic
Yes.
event. You see something bad, it's traumatic, and you can say that's PTSD. But when we think military and we think PTSD, immediately the associations to come to mind are, this is somebody that was in a combat zone, fought, experienced something having to do with war, and
Yes.
that's what's causing the pain that they're struggling with. And that's where it's a little misleading, and we have to address that, I think.
What you said earlier too, which I think is so important to point out, is that the general public then will say, oh, he has PTSD.
Right.
So that somehow makes him a good veteran.
Right.
All our veterans are good veterans.
Right.
They are willing to lay down their life
Right.
for this country, for our freedom. Just like the police officers and the firemen. They're willing to serve and protect us.
Right.
And there's good and bad
Sure.
in every, so let's not go there. But
Right.
we need to respect
Sure.
that they're doing this for us,
Right.
for our freedom.
Right. Right.
Not to pat themselves on the back.
Exactly. It's got to go beyond that, thank you for your service. It's got to be
Correct.
something more. But there also has to be an honest assessment of what it is we have appreciation for. And it can be just the service. But unfortunately, our culture has created this image that everybody's buying into. The veterans are buying into it. Civilians are buying into it. That image, and Wounded Warriors,
Yes.
that organization has taken full advantage of this, that image of the suffering, injured veteran.
Yes.
And what happens is the civilian feels sympathy and pity for that, and let me open up my checkbook to that. The veteran sees that and says, well, I want that. I want that acknowledgement. I want that attention. So if having PTSD gives me that, then, and I'm not
Yes.
even saying that this is necessarily going on consciously. It could be going on subconsciously, and they're not fully aware of it. And so I think that's a big contributing factor to these discrepancies of all these numbers of people getting diagnosed with PTSD and then only a small percentage of people seeing combat. And then put it in mathematic context, we are spending over $4 billion a year on people who are being diagnosed with PTSD and the aid that they're getting out of that. That's $4 billion that I think could be going to ambitious, robust, meaningful veteran employment programs, kind of like the GI Bill. So the difference being that we're empowering our veterans instead of creating this culture of the wounded warrior and let's feel sorry for them. We've got to go back to, like you were talking about, your father's generation, the World War II generation of veterans, and truly thanking them for their service, honoring them for their service, and then giving them the opportunity and letting them take it from there.
Absolutely, but transitioning them. And, there's certainly, we have to give them employment.
Yep.
No one in the world, we keep people depressed because then they're also easily controlled.
Right.
But that's a whole nother subject.
Sure.
But we need to, coming home and not having a job and not being able to be a man and take care of your family can lead to depression, which then you can label as post-traumatic
Sure.
stress disorder.
Yep.
So we'll be right back after this message and we'll continue this discussion. We'll be right back.
For professional motorcycle transport and towing, think Kickstart Fabrications Motorcycle Towing. Proudly serving all of Long Island, we feature expert handling and 24/7 service. So send a limo for your toy with Kickstart Fabrications Motorcycle Towing.
know you already want a Toyota, but when you want more from your Toyota store, you want Smithtown Toyota, where every Toyota comes with Smithtown Toyota's Toyota for Life program, giving you lifetime New York State inspections, lifetime 10% discounts on all parts and service, 2 years of complimentary oil changes, 2 years of scheduled maintenance, and more, all at no cost to you, plus low clear-out deals on every Toyota in stock. Get more from your Toyota store. Hurry to Smithtown Toyota.
Welcome to Formula Auto Wash, where every day is a great day for a car wash. Open 7 days a week from 8 a.m. to 5:30 p.m. Sundays 8 a.m. to 4 p.m. Detailing packages for every budget, starting out at $29.99. 100% hand wash and detail centre. Horsehair and microfiber brushes and mitts. Proudly using Ecolab Blue Coral soaps and waxes. Formula Auto Wash has served the community for over 30 years. Senior discounts all day, every day. Ladies' Day Wednesday, $3 off any wash. Early bird discount Monday through Thursday till 9:30 a.m. Check out our website, formulaautowash.com.
Welcome back to Long Island in Crisis. So, you know, we always talk about substance use disorder. My 21-year-old son, how old was your brother?
He was about the same age, 21.
What date in 2012 did your brother pass?
June 23rd.
So he was 3 months after Thomas. And they're here with us right now.
Yeah.
There's no doubt about that.
Yeah.
Just a terrible loss in so many ways. So being now, coming home as a veteran, serving your country, what we're saying is, you know, there are all these programs. So Wounded Warriors, it came out in the news that they collected all that money and it never went to the purpose that was really for what it was meant to go to.
Right.
So we need to have programs that someone that comes back here, you were a corpsman, so you were a medic. Could you be an EMT? Could you be an emergency medical technician?
So that's a great question. Up until very recently, the corpsman rate, the MOS, the military occupation, corpsman, when corpsmen would get out of the Navy, when they would get out of the military, their skills would not technically transfer over to the civilian medic field, which is just bizarre, right? Because, I mean, we had very good training. We had very good medical Navy training. And beyond that, as any person in the medical field will tell you, the best training, sadly, tragically, more often than not, is experience.
Yes.
You know, you can only learn so much in a book and in a classroom and in a lecture and in a PowerPoint. In the medical field, particularly when dealing with trauma, you learn the best on your feet when you're treating someone.
And you have no time for error.
Right, and that's what we dealt with in the war zone. So it's mind-boggling when you think of the experience and the very good training that we had, and we could not
come back
over.
Now, I can certainly understand going to work for New York City, you know, fire department as an EMT.
Right.
That there may be some things that you would have to learn.
Yeah, maybe refreshers or something, but we're not talking that this should be years, or I would even say months.
Right. Or that you would have to take a whole nother course that costs money.
Right. Well, there you have it right there. I think you're hitting the nail on the head.
So why are we holding hostage for the almighty? So it's always follow the money.
Right.
Follow the money for how do drugs get into this country.
Right.
Follow the money. You know, great bills were signed federally last week.
Right.
There's no teeth behind
Where's
them.
the money?
Where's the money to fund all the great ideas? So it's an election year. Yes, I voted for the CARA Act, but put your money where your mouth is.
Right.
Shut up and do something about it. It's very easy to talk rhetoric.
Yeah.
Roll up your sleeves and get dirty.
Right. Exactly.
So what needs to be done for our veterans?
So to take that, to use that specific example, that example of the corpsman, in West Virginia, just recently, Governor McAuliffe signed into legislation an act simplifying the process specifically for corpsmen. So when a corpsman gets out of the Navy in West Virginia, it's seamless, almost the transition from military life and work as a corpsman into the civilian sector as a medic. So that's something we need to see happening in other
Yes.
states, and not just with the job of a corpsman, with other jobs
With
in
other
the military.
jobs, a mechanic.
Exactly, a
Come on.
mechanic, a medic.
Communications.
There's so many
There's-
jobs.
It's unending. So the military is business.
Right. So
It
what
is
you
a
should
well-run business machine.
so what you need to do is you need to first of all talk with the person that's in the service, in the military, and ideally I say a year out, but realistically let's go with 6 months, but it really can't be less than 6 months. The conversation has to start. Okay, private St. George, what are you going to be doing when you get out of the Navy? What's your plans? Or in the Navy, it's not private. I'm sounding like a fool now. It's Seaman St. George in the Navy.
Right.
Or private in the Army, PFC in the Marine Corps. What are you going to do? What are you going to do when you get out of the military? Well, I don't know what I'm going to do. Well, you're a mechanic right now. Is that something you want to do in the civilian sector? Yeah, I'd like to do that. Okay, well, let's start looking into what you need to do. Where are you going home to? Where's home? Well, New York, Long Island. All right, let's start looking at what you need to do to make that happen when you get out. Or no, I don't want to be a mechanic. I want to go to college. All right, let's start looking at that pathway.
Why can't our military work with the private sector and say, we have, there can be an email blast, there can be something that if it's made public that all private sector businesses could go and look in the employment. Because what a great way to find somebody who's experienced,
right,
who has discipline, who has all of those things, and what a great way to pay back for service to this country.
Yep.
So, because I know that when you come back here and unemployment leads to despair, which leads to thinking about everything I did see and experience, and that despair, depression, substance use disorder.
And then we look at the statistics like the 22, which again, I preface with that number is a little misleading, but still. And even putting the suicides aside, just bad, people unfortunately living an existence that they shouldn't have to exist, especially after serving their country. They shouldn't have to live, suffering, and their families suffering. We talked about the families before, because the families are going to be suffering throughout that whole process.
When you have someone, their loved one, come back from seeing, especially if they saw active combat, you're not coming back as the same person. That bright-eyed, bushy-tailed person that went into the service.
When I think about my
you're coming back with scars.
When I think about my experience in the military, and I think about having gone to Afghanistan and coming home, I think there are so many positives to come out of it, believe it or not. It's made me stronger. It's taught me things that you can learn nowhere else in the world.
Correct.
It has made me a stronger man in so many ways. But if I'm really honest, if I'm having an honest conversation, I know that I came out of that angrier.
Right.
Right? And I don't know if that anger is ever going to go away. So what I have to figure out is, how can I deal with that anger? Because I wasn't as angry as I was before I left. I know that wasn't like that when I left, and when I came home it was. So I have to assume safely that Afghanistan and my experience in the military had something to do with that. So rather than hiding from that or denying it or pretending it's not an issue, I need to face it head on and say to myself, how can I deal with this? So one of the ways that I try to deal with my anger is I work out a lot. I go to the gym a lot. But I also do the things that we do. I find by immersing myself in these causes, working on the drug epidemic, working with veterans, I'm keeping myself busy, and I'm channeling my anger in a productive and meaningful way.
Yes.
But when you have a lot of veterans who don't have those things, who aren't working out, who aren't finding causes or employment that's meaningful and fulfilling to them, or something to keep them busy and keep them going, then of course they're going to be left to sit with their anger. They're going to be left to sit with their sadness.
And that leads to domestic abuse. That leads to,
them hurting themselves, hurting their family members, their loved ones.
and certainly substance use disorder always comes right back in. So,
Yeah.
We're creating
Right,
the situation that fuels
right,
this epidemic continually.
right.
We always talk about young people. They get instant gratification for everything. They get everything in an instant. And when
Yep.
forced to sit in some uncomfortable situations, take a pill, smoke a joint, drink a drink, whatever it is to get rid of that uncomfortable situation.
Right.
So we were just talking before. It was a great dinner we had.
Yeah, yeah.
And it's in the struggle that you find out who you
Right.
really are. But we need to help people through their
Right.
struggles.
Right.
So we're talking about a cultural shift.
Yeah.
Talking about a societal shift.
Yep.
We're always talking about getting back into community.
Right.
So community takes care of their community.
Yeah. Yep.
So let's try, how can we help our veterans that come back here?
Right.
We have, fortunately, on Long Island, New York, in Northport, we probably have one of the best veterans hospitals around
Yes,
in
we
the
do.
country.
Yes, we do.
We're very, very fortunate here,
Right.
and so are our veterans.
Right.
So how can people get involved, and how can we start to really help transition people back into society?
So,
I will share, of course we have no names. I have a gentleman, because I'm a financial advisor by trade, and in his 60s. And when I first met him, very curious that he was in his 60s, and I started to share, for whatever the reason, and that happens a lot, quantum entanglement, God putting people together,
Right.
Whatever you want to call it. I'll
Right.
call it God putting people in my life that's going to open my eyes to something new that I need to learn.
yeah.
And he shared with me, 18 years old, went to the Vietnam War. He was a Marine, saw horrific things.
Right.
Came back to New York, moved to Texas. He had his own business. He designed leather, and explained to me that at night, he was a recluse though.
Right.
He would crawl in his apartment because he thought he was being attacked. That's how he was released from the military.
Right.
With all this,
Right.
what they saw there,
Right.
and he lived like that for over 20 years.
Right.
At any one time, ready to shoot someone or himself. So fortunately, he met this wonderful woman who got him the help that he needed through the veterans.
Right.
And knowing that there were a bunch of other guys that felt just like him, and being able to share and work through that now.
Right.
We need to do a better job than to commit somebody to a 20-year sentence of living in fear and anguish and anxiety and all of those things, reliving experiences that don't need to be relived.
Right.
But you're right when we say that. He saw very active combat. We have a lot of people in the military that are just depressed because they can't find work. They can't find meaningful work. They can't take care of their families. And that is a crime.
Right. Yeah, I mean, I think you have to look at it, we could very briefly start it at the global scale and then get more focused from there. And on the global scale, there's not much we can do, but what we can do is we can petition our lawmakers. And on Long Island, we have 4 congresspeople. We have Congressman King, we have Congressman Zeldin, who you know,
Yes.
and who is a veteran.
He is a veteran and very active
And
in
served
that.
in Iraq, and an attorney. And we have Congressman Israel, who's leaving. All
Yes.
right, his seat's going to be open. Jack Martin's a Republican, and Tom Suozzi, a Democrat's running for that seat. And then we have Congresswoman Kathleen Rice, who I talked with at the VA today. Now, 2 Democrats, 2 Republicans. That could change in this coming election, but nevertheless, we've got it down the middle. And the 4 of them, Republicans and Democrats, came together on veteran legislation. This is the first time they've ever all come together, and it was on veteran legislation, and it was I believe, called the Fair Veterans Act. And what that bill did was it addressed the problem that you have a lot of men and women who are getting separated from the military with dishonorable discharges or less than honorable discharges, And when that happens, they're no longer entitled to their
Services,
benefits. Right?
correct.
And so what this law does essentially is it puts the onus on the DOD and says, look, if that's going to happen, the burden of proof has got to fall on you. If these guys are going to get these separations, you got to make sure that they are truly deserving of it. And it's giving the veterans the benefit of the doubt.
Okay.
I think the number was over 20,000. I think that was the number. I could be wrong. But it's thousands of people that are in that predicament. Now, I'm not against that. I think that's good. But I also know, having been in the military, there were men and women I served with who had those discharges. And I'm going to be very frank with you right now. Some of them were deserving of those discharges. So what I think these 4 Congress people need to do, and what we can do, and what I talked to Congresswoman Rice about, and I said to Congresswoman Rice, I said, I don't know how possible this is, but you all came together on that legislation. What I would love to do is to get the 4 of you in a room together, and let's expand upon that consensus you guys created on that legislation with something even deeper. Let's go even further back into the military. Before they're getting the dishonorable discharge or the less than honorable discharge. What more can the military be doing to work with those at-risk military service men and women to make sure that that doesn't happen? And if it does happen, it's a last resort and it's got to happen. But what more can the military be doing? And that goes to the transition that you were talking about.
Yes.
You know, at dinner, the group of us were talking about myth and the importance of myth. And one of my favorite stories is the story of Odysseus, right? Odysseus, after fighting in the war in Troy, he comes home on his way home and he's lost. He's lost at sea. For 10 years, he's lost at sea. And that's the story of the Odyssey. And at the end of those 10 years, he finally makes his way home to his wife and his son. The lesson behind that story, behind that epic poem, is that for Odysseus to be ready to come home to his wife and son, he needed those 10 years. That 10 years was symbolic of the transition. He couldn't just go back from the battlefields and fighting in Troy to his wife and son. He wouldn't have been ready. They wouldn't have recognized him. The stuff that he saw in that war, he needed the 10 years to process everything. He needed to go through that journey. That's what we have to create for our men and women in the military. We've got to create something that I'm calling the Odysseus Project. We've got to give them that Odyssey-like experience and let it be that year. And part of that experience, maybe it's different activities and things that are helping them reconcile and process whatever they may have experienced in the military, but it's also practical and saying, what do you want to do when you get out? You know, what is it that you want to pursue in the civilian sector?
Anytime that someone feels empowered with their own destiny of their own life, life shifts. So why do people use substances?
Filling that void.
There's a void. There's a void, there's a pain, there's an anguish. For my son, loss of all 3 grandparents, and my ex and I got divorced. That's a lot for a 15-year-old kid to handle. You know, there's trauma at home, there's trauma in life, there's trauma, you know, and how do we cope with that?
Right.
So you're leaving the military. That's a big adjustment for anyone. You've had 3 meals a day, you've had your clothes, you've been told what to do, when to do, where to go.
Think about you're wearing a uniform. You don't have to worry about, do I wear this tie today? Do I wear that tie today? You're wearing a uniform.
What clothes do I have? They're washed for me.
The language, it's not I'm going to the bathroom, I'm just going to the head. It's not I'm going to get something to eat, I'm going to get chow.
Right.
You know, there's a whole vernacular. It's a whole other culture.
It's, you know, we can even make the analogy to leaving a treatment facility where you've been told what to do, how to do it. You've gone to meetings, you've been in a bubble. You're in this bubble. Now all of a sudden you're not getting your pay deposited for doing what you did in the military or wherever. We have to transition them because we're going to have less of a burden on society. So it always comes down to follow the money.
Yeah.
It always comes down to that.
And in the long term, we'd end up saving more money. In the long term, we'd end up saving money. If insurance company kept people in treatment longer, we'd end up saving money because they would get the help that they needed. Right. So it's all the same. It's community taking care of community. Right. And that's the more important. That's the moral side of it. You can make the economic argument.
Treat people the way you would like to be treated.
The golden rule.
The golden rule.
Yeah, and if we do that, we can get the next great generation. And let me tell you right now, Linda, we need them more than ever.
We need the
ISIS,
yes.
what's going on with ISIS, what's happening domestically, whichever side of the spectrum you're on, Republican or Democrat, I think most Americans would agree they're disgusted with what's happening politically. We need that next great generation to step up. Economically, we need them. We need them in terms of the security of this country. We need them politically. We need more people stepping up and getting involved.
We just need people to, if you wouldn't want it done to yourself, don't do it to anybody else. I don't care what color they are. I don't care what religion they are. I don't
golden
care.
rule.
It's the golden rule. We're all people.
Right.
So we just need to take a step back and just look at things just a little bit differently.
Yeah. I think that globally, that's what has to happen. And our Congress people, they're part of the federal government. They're in a position, and the way you start it too is you start with the VA and the DOD starting to coordinate with one another. So the transition is seamless. Military has done their work. They've prepared the guys. So once they get out of the Department of Defense and the military, the VA is ready for the handoff.
Yes.
And the civilian world is ready to embrace them.
Absolutely.
That's the global scale. Going back to your question, what can we do? Now bring it down to the local level.
You know, there aren't as many, you know, all our kids, so we had kids on, which will be another show that we tape for next week. Everybody has to go to college.
Yeah.
But we still need tradespeople. We still need vocational workers. We
Right.
still need all of those people. There's no shame in any of these vocations that
No.
anybody chooses. So if you learn to be a mechanic in the military and you can come out and be a mechanic, I would love to hire an experienced mechanic
Yeah.
who can work on a really good deadline, I'm going to be quite sure, in the
Right.
military.
Right. That's exactly it.
That needs to something to be fixed at a moment's notice, in a moment, because it means a matter of life
Right.
and death.
That's right.
So, you know, there's so much to be gained.
Mm-hmm.
We have happier families, happier wives, happier children,
Yep.
happier husbands.
Yeah.
When a family is happy and whole, there's less medical,
Yep.
there's less societal costs, there's
Yep.
less a lot of events going on.
Right. It expands into the community. The
Yes.
community is healthier.
The community is healthier. When our communities are healthier, we're all healthier.
Yeah.
We all feel safe.
Right.
So there's our good friend Kim Laube, there's four sides, you know,
Yeah.
in community and school and peers and family. That's what makes our young people or any person feel safe,
Right.
is to be surrounded by those areas,
Right.
that I am a whole person, that I'm okay. I'm okay, I'm safe.
Right.
I'm safe, I'm in my community.
Right. Right.
So tell me about Project Vet that you
Right.
do in Northport School District.
So that goes to the local level. So, and that, again, when I came
I'm going to
home-
hold you.
Your commercial?
We're going to go to commercial, and then we'll talk about Project Vet.
All right.
We'll be right back.
Professional motorcycle transport and towing, think Kickstart Fabrications Motorcycle Towing. Proudly serving all of Long Island, we feature expert handling and 24/7 service. So send a limo for your toy with Kickstart Fabrications Motorcycle Towing.
Shannon Gates is the #1 fence provider on Long Island, with the most inventory in stock, including vinyl, chain link, and aluminum. Gates offers a custom powder-coated system that prevents rust throughout the life of the fence. We carry fence tools to the trade. We even stock wood, rail, and glass hardware as well. Shannon Gates has our very own patented locking system. The next time you need fencing of any sort, both commercial and private, give Shannon Gates a call at 631-392-4330. You can also visit our website at shannongatesinc.com.
For professional motorcycle transport and towing, think Kickstart Fabrications Motorcycle Towing. Proudly serving all of Long Island, we feature expert handling and 24/7 service. So send a limo for your toy with Kickstart Fabrications Motorcycle Towing.
Welcome back to Long Island in Crisis. So, Daryl, Project Vet.
Yeah.
How are you building your students? So on many levels, you're doing great work.
Yeah.
We have the Project 72, actually, which
Yep.
is 72 is the number of people that die from overdose.
Yep.
And you're empowering and building upon students that choose to be drug and alcohol free,
Right.
which is amazing. And now you also, at the same time, doing Project Vet.
Yep.
So tell me a little bit about that.
So when I got out of the military, as you know, the substance abuse and the way that I was able to kind of cope with that was by creating Project 72 with Tammy. But then there was the other side of it, like dealing with my own experiences in the military and seeing my friends having difficulties and trying to figure out how could I do more to help on that front. And a number of my colleagues who were very supportive and shared that passion that, were grateful for my service and respectful of it, wanted to also be a part of that. So we began talking about what we could do, and we came up with the idea of creating a club. And my colleague and dear friend Jim DeRosa actually came up with the name, the acronym, which is VETS, Project VETS, and it stands for Veterans Enlisting Teachers and Students.
Awesome.
Yeah, and we discussed what it was we wanted to do with the club. We had started talking to our classes about it, getting their feedback, and then we said, all right, we're going to meet the week before Christmas break and, tell your friends. We put an announcement in the morning announcements, and our first meeting when, to kick the club off and talk about the club, it was standing room only. We had like over 50 kids packed into the class.
Wow.
So we knew in that moment that we tapped into something special. And that in that first meeting, we just talked about the club and what it was that we had hoped to do through the club. And on the one hand, with the club, what we wanted to do was we wanted to help veterans in need. But on the other hand, going back to what we've really been talking a lot about in this interview, was there's also a large group of veterans that are not looking for help. And that goes to that empowerment piece.
Correct.
And we want to get past that, oh, how can we help you? How can we help you? I mean, we understand there are veterans in need, and we want to help those veterans. And we do a lot, and I'll talk about that in a second, in helping those veterans that are legitimately in need. Legitimate being the key word, because there are some that look to take advantage. But then there's also that segment of veterans like myself. I don't think I'm a veteran in need, but I'm a veteran who's constantly looking for empowerment. Why do I want to run for office? Why am I doing all these different clubs? Because I feel the need to find fulfilling things that give me purpose. So those types of veterans, how can we work with them? So the club really had a twofold purpose. One, to help veterans in need, but also the second was to provide opportunities of empowerment for veterans where the students and the veterans could work together.
And veterans, the military is camaraderie.
Yeah.
You don't leave your brother or your sister on the battlefield. You have to have that bond with each other.
Right.
So just to keep that going here
Right.
is comforting.
Yep.
Because we're still talking about being surrounded, being enveloped, having that warm blanket around you of that feeling that somebody has my back.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, that's huge. That sense of camaraderie is, it's irreplaceable. It's
Yes.
why I keep in touch with a number of the guys I serve with. We had a t-shirt that we made for our platoon when we got out, and we're all talking together now because we're looking to get more of those shirts ordered, because it was years ago and a lot of our shirts are either lost or just need to be replaced.
They
So
might
we're all
be too
talking.
small now.
Yeah,
They shrunk.
yeah.
That's it. They
Right.
shrunk.
But we're talking on Facebook, and I'm talking with guys I haven't talked with in years, and we're making fun of each other and laughing
And you
with
pick
each
up
other.
that friendship
It's that
seemingly as if
camaraderie.
it was yesterday.
Yep. And then there's guys that I talk with every day. One of my buddies, he loves to bust my chops. Every once in a while, he'll text me, "Wake up, Dad." And I talk to him almost every day. And, these guys are my brothers. I mean, when my brother passed away and I found out, the first two people to find out were, guys that I was serving with. And I'll never forget it, in the barracks, you know what it was like, and just thinking my world was over. And I remember saying to one of my buddies, Cam, I said, I've lost my brother, my only brother. He's gone. He's gone. And I remember him saying to me, he said, that's not true. He's like, I'm your brother, and Vince is your brother, and we're here for you, and we're going to be here for you. And, you know, one of those guys that I served with, he just recently lost his brother to an overdose. He's from Kentucky, you know, and that was a rough.
It's just, you know, it's
everywhere.
It's everywhere.
It's
It's
in
everywhere.
Kentucky, you know.
Everywhere.
Yeah.
It's in the, you know, Ohio. Remember 60 Minutes or
Yep.
2020
Yep.
did that expose in the Midwest where everyone thinks there's nothing going on. It's
Gloucester,
going on.
Massachusetts, it's everywhere.
It's everywhere.
But, you know, I don't want to get off topic, but, you know, you kind of took me down that road by bringing up the camaraderie, and that's how powerful it is with all of those things. But it's difficult for Project Vets to kind of tap into that, but I think we're doing that. I think what's really interesting is that when we're working on projects with veterans, there's a new kind of camaraderie that's coming out of it between the students and the veterans, and that's exciting.
It's exactly what I was thinking, though, is, you know, Tom Brokaw did that wonderful series on The Greatest Generation.
Yep.
And what we learned from that group, you know, and I learned many things from my dad was a World War II veteran, but that generation was committed to marriage, committed to family,
Values.
committed to values. And to listen to that generation, and my next door neighbors were like another set of parents to me, and I always remember them saying, it didn't mean that my wife and I always got along.
Right.
It just meant that we were committed to one another, and it was okay if we didn't
Right.
talk for a week.
Right.
That was okay.
Right.
But
You
we
didn't get a
weren't going to
divorce.
walk out
Right.
on each other. It wasn't that easy. They kept that all together.
Right.
And there's something to be said for that.
Yeah.
So, you know, it's that camaraderie, it's
Yep.
that feeling. We need to recreate that.
Yeah.
Because our young people don't feel safe in this world for many, many, many different reasons on many different levels.
Right.
Family life has changed.
Yep.
Everything has changed. The world moves exponentially at
Yep.
a pace that you can't process.
Right.
They're young, their brains do process it.
Right.
It shouldn't have to process it.
Right.
That's how I'll preface it.
Yeah.
They're smart enough to move at that level,
Right.
but they're not emotionally
Right.
and spiritually able to handle
Right.
all the information that's coming out at them.
So what we have to do is we have to create sanctuaries, if
Yes.
you will, and the school is a perfect sanctuary. Libraries, you know, as things become more electronic, Kindles and things like that, you know, books, as far as I'm concerned, they'll never become obsolete.
I like a book too.
So,
I
but
do.
for a lot of people, it's becoming an issue. So libraries are faced with, like, how do we survive? How do we stay relevant? And they're becoming community centers.
Yes, absolutely.
So libraries, schools, these are sanctuaries where we can offer kids a place to go to get away from all of that.
But you know, talking to young people and listening to them, it's very empowering for them to sit with their peers,
Yeah.
discuss a problem among themselves, because their brains all work.
Right.
You know, they're going to come up with the
Yeah.
response that
Yeah.
they need to come up with,
Yep.
not with someone with 20 years of life experience on them.
Right.
What my answer would be to a 16-year-old isn't necessarily what their response to
Right.
themselves will be.
Right.
So do they need a little bit of both? Yes.
Yeah.
But all of these things are going to combat substance use disorder. I'm quite sure of that.
Right.
And the education of knowing that it is a disease and it is an adolescent disease. Our good friend Kim Lauby has
Yeah.
taught me that. Addiction is an adolescent disease, and if we can keep a drink or a drug from entering an adolescent body till ideally the age of 25,
Yeah.
but the longer that we prolong,
The better the odds are.
the better the odds that they won't be afflicted with this
Right.
lifelong disease.
Right.
So if I, as a parent, knew that by not giving my kids candy,
Right.
that they wouldn't have diabetes, well, I'm not going to give them candy.
Right.
And if I could protect them from the Zika virus, I will.
Right.
So we protect them in so many ways.
Right.
But when it comes to substance use disorder, we consider that a choice.
Right.
They made one bad choice.
Right.
Yes.
Right.
Don't let that be a lifetime of burden on
Yeah.
them, though. So how can we get involved?
So, with Project Vets, and just stepping back and connecting it to something you had mentioned just a moment ago, you're right. I mean, the kids learn a lot from each other, but they can learn from us too. And one of the great things about Project Vets, one of the things that we do is we take veterans in our community and we have them speak about their experiences. So one of the things I'm very proud that I started at Northport with Project Vets was, and one of the students from the other shows, Devin, who's actually in the studio now, filmed it one year, I think. We had the veterans from every major conflict, from World War II right up to Iraq and Afghanistan,
my gosh,
come to the school. I moderated the event, and they all shared their experiences. And then we opened it up to student questions. And I got to tell you, it was powerful.
I went with my daughter, was a Girl Scout, and I was a Girl Scout leader. So we went to one of the submarines, I think in Massachusetts.
Okay.
And we stayed on the ship.
Mm-hmm.
And the next day, going and seeing the airplanes and everything else, and listening to the World War. Now, my dad was a World War II vet, but I never asked him on that level because he was my dad.
Right.
So it wasn't something that, but to listen to what their experience was brought a whole different type of respect.
Yeah. Right.
Respect for what they had accomplished for me.
Yeah.
For my children, my grandchildren, and so on and so on and so on.
Yep.
Freedom.
Yeah.
It's incredible what you can learn.
Yeah.
And we talk about go-to people sometimes.
Those are pretty good go-to people.
Those are pretty awesome go-to people. And there are going to be friendships that are brought about by just getting to know those people. Souls connect for many different reasons.
Yeah.
They just do.
Right.
And when we give our young people more of an opportunity for great examples of living heroes instead of the Kardashians or some, ball player that really isn't doing what they need to be.
Right.
So it's amazing. I love working with you.
Yeah, likewise.
We're going to bring things to different school districts on Long Island and
my
to
hope.
see it replicated throughout Long Island, and then we'll take on the rest of New York State. New York State, I'm proud to be a New Yorker.
Yeah.
This historic bills that were signed into law just a few weeks ago by Governor Cuomo, and to have the federal government looking at what we've enacted to make it a federal standard for all 50 states is pretty damn impressive, and I'm proud to be a small part of it in any way that I can serve.
Right.
And we need to just come back around. So in closing, thank you for joining us tonight. We got off probably a little bit off topic from substance use disorder, but it all comes together because there's a void in society, and people, unfortunately, typically drink and drug because of something underlying else that's going on, and we need to come together and be empathetic and be sympathetic and practice the golden rule. So thank you for joining me tonight. I look forward to seeing you next week. Have a great, blessed, wonderful week, and kiss your family tonight. Good night.
Another dark hotel